3 degrees, so it could be a little uncomfortable for the riders in their leathers here this afternoon. The situation on the points table after the 2 rounds so far at the halfway mark in the Swan Series for 1980, we see as we have a look at this now, Graham Crosby from New Zealand is a clear leader with 38 points. He's 5 points ahead of Greg Pretty from South Australia with 33 points. Steve Trinder from Albury in New South Wales is lying in 3rd position with 32 points. And Gary Coleman from New South Wales is in 4th position with 27 points. Ron Haslam from the United Kingdom down there in 8th position with 10 points. With me now, Will Hagan, who'll be joining us in the main commentary position this afternoon. Will, so far the Swan Series for 1980 has been pretty successful with good crowds at Oran Park and Surfers Paradise.
It's been magical racing, yes. A record crowd at Oran Park for the past 4 years, an all-time record crowd at Surfers Paradise, and what looks like a record crowd here today at Adelaide International Raceway, and that's the result of some superlative racing. There was 1.3 seconds covering 1st to 2nd place in the 4 heats so far.
Indeed, it's wonderful racing, all right, and Graham Crosby seems to have some sort of a stranglehold on it at the moment.
I don't think Graham would say he's got a stranglehold. He's got a 5-point lead, but he's on a circuit today with a more than 1 kilometre long main straight, which will suit the well-tuned TZ 750s, such as Steve Trinder's and Greg Pretty's. A long straight that sees them up around the 280 kilometres an hour mark, and with a bit of a headwind too, which will favour the race bikes. So he hasn't by any means got it won. He's going to work all the way.
You can see Greg Pretty give him a good run here today on Greg's home track.
I'd reckon. Greg, quietly confident, always goes well here and knows the track absolutely backwards. He really does.
Well, he holds the record of 57.1, which is pretty important for him.
Yes, and Steve Trinder reckons that they'll be under that record today. He reckons they'll be down in the 56s.
Well, Steve Trinder's one name that's really been bandied around for this Swan Series this year. He's lying comfortably in 3rd place at the moment.
Yes, very bad luck, but Steve had his 750 Yamaha go into 2 cylinders at Surfers and copped him a 6th place, so he's been disadvantaged by that because he's had a 1st and a 2nd in the various heats, as Pretty has, and Crosby's had 2 wins. So that those riders are very, very even, all of them.
So all in all, some great motorcycling coming up here in just a few moments' time. We'll be taking the 1st heat in the 3rd round of the Swan Series. Will Hagan will be in our main commentary point, along with John Smales, and guest commentator today will be Greg Hansford. Let's go now to our central commentary position.
As bikes warm up for the 1st round of the Swan Insurance Series at Adelaide International Raceway, we see the circuit 2.41 kilometres around. The lap record stands to defending Swan Insurance champion Greg Pretty on 57.1 seconds, a lap average of 150.5 kilometres an hour. They come off the main straight at about 260 kilometres an hour, go through a 2 apex right-hand corner at approximately 140 kilometres an hour, then up through the gears for the back straight, reaching a maximum speed of about 210 to 220 kilometres an hour as they come down through the gears for the Uni Royal S's, getting back to 1st gear for BP corner, the hard left-hand corner that takes them up onto the Motorcraft Bowl, which you see this rider going through now, taken in 3rd gear at approximately 180 kilometres an hour, and then they fling themselves down the main straight once again. With me in the main commentary position, former Australian champion and one of the leaders of the World Motor Racing Series, Greg Hansford. Greg, what sort of problems are the riders facing today? What are the challenges for Graham Crosby on the Formula One bike against the 750cc Grand Prix machines?
Well, John, I think Graham's going to have his work cut out here for him more than the previous 2 rounds at Oran Park and Surfers Paradise, because this straight here is much longer than those 2 circuits, where top speed is more important, and the Yamahas seem to have a bit more top speed than the bike Crosby's on.
There's a very crisp headwind facing the riders down the straight. How will that hamper them?
It will be more of a disadvantage to Crosby on the big Suzuki. The 750 Yamahas are much more streamlined with their better fairings and the better designed windscreens than the bike that Graham's on.
The heat today is getting up towards 30 degrees Celsius. It will be very hard on tyres.
Should be very hard. Yesterday they predicted only 22 degrees, but it's come up to just over 30 degrees, I believe, and the circuit here, it's a very dark surface on the circuit, and it holds the heat very well, and they could have a few tyre problems.
The bikes come back onto the grid, lining up for the 1st heat, a 12-lap heat. Will Hagan has the lap times, the practice times.
Graham Crosby's taken pole position. As we look at Ron Haslam there, who was 5th fastest on official practices yesterday. There's Jeffrey Sale on 10. Gary Coleman, 52. Lee Roebuck on 20. Ron Bolden, 59. But Crosby took pole with a 58.2. But the man that went faster than that later in the day, but not counting for grid positions, was Steve Trinder on the Team Taylor 750 Yamaha. He did a 57.4, just 0.3 of a second slower outside Pretty's lap record.
And dramas occur. Greg Pretty has arrived back from the 2 warm-up laps and finds himself on the second row of the grid, squeezed out from his rightful place on row 1. He will not be happy about that. Beside him also on the second row is Dave Aldana, also riding a 750cc Yamaha, loaned to him by Pretty's people, Yamaha Pitmans. But Pretty seems content now. He's going to start from the second row, which won't please him at all. Glenn Dix moves towards the starting lights, and they're gone.
Pretty got boxed in, and he couldn't see the green light either. So,
but look at Aldana start. Aldana straight from the second row of the grid and straight into the lead position. What a fantastic start from Dave Aldana, the American.
that's been headed as they go into the right-hander. The field bunching up with him, 16 riders, some of the country's best and 2 of the world's best in among them. Graham Crosby, the world champion on Formula One bikes this year. Ron Haslam leading there, the 1959 world champion on Formula One motorcycles. Into the back part of the circuit they go. 998cc Honda, putting out about 130 brake horsepower, race frame, and Haslam, as Muir goes underneath into second place, seeing Aldana back to third. So Graham Muir, who practiced very quickly yesterday with a good set of tyres on his TZ 750 Yamaha, and forging forward is Greg Pretty, the local hero, on 64.
In 5th position, Graham Crosby. But there goes Pretty now, leading Aldana.
Crosby tucked in behind 2, only 2 places back, 1 between him and Pretty. Muir into the lead though, over Haslam.
And Aldana snatches back 3rd place from Pretty.
The American very unhappy with the superbike that he ran in the 2 previous rounds, getting onto this 750 Yamaha for this meeting, which Pitmans have done an enormous amount of work on since last Wednesday. And they too, of course, have prepared Pretty's bike, the bike that won him the series last year.
Graham Muir training that Yamaha TZ 750 right over. The Albury-Wodonga rider riding so well here today.
26 years old, been campaigning that bike now for about 18 months, doing a good job, but always handicapped by lack of budget for the critical area, particularly of tyres, as he ranges up Crosby on Aldana. Let's see the speed difference here between a 750 Yamaha and Crosby's big 1000cc bike. He wrecked the 1100 motor on that bike last week at Surfers, and there's Pretty in second place now, looking at Graham Muir.
There's Crosby up into 3rd position. Aldana right behind him. Muir in the lead. Pretty now starting to breathe down his exhaust pipes. Behind them, Haslam, Crosby. Crosby dropped a valve yesterday afternoon in practice when he over-revved, has replaced all 8 valves in the bike, hasn't had a chance to run them in, he's doing so right now.
But Muir from Pretty, with Pretty closing on the bowl that he knows so well as a South Australian resident who's ridden hundreds of laps here at Adelaide International Raceway. He's the local hero. He won the series last year, but fell heavily at Donington Park earlier this year as a 25-year-old grimly determined Adelaide resident tucks in there, now pops up under brakes, and as you can see, is making ground on Muir. Beautiful riding from Pretty, who says he's very pleased with his form because he's had a bad year, and he got back here on the 14th of August, went into hospital on the 29th to have his shoulder done, and he said if the series had started a couple of weeks earlier, he doesn't think his shoulder would have been strong enough to let him ride the way he's riding now. It's not 100%, but he says it's not worrying him when he rides.
Now, watch how Pretty comes onto the bowl. He is the fastest man through this speed bowl. Look at him catching Muir. but Muir's got his measure higher on the bowl now. Chops down tight and powers out back onto the straight.
Greg Hansford, what can Graham Crosby do trying to catch these Yamahas running away on speed on the main straight?
Nothing
As Greg Pretty hits the lead.
He can't do much at all, Will. He's just got to sit there and hope that he can stay with them. He's being held up a bit there by Haslam and Aldana, but if he can get past those two, he might have some sort of a chance of catching them up. But if he lets them get too far in front, he's going to have a big job in front of him to make that ground up.
Already Pretty has equalled the fastest practice time of yesterday, 57.4, but that was set by Trinder as we see Crosby third.
So Crosby now out in pursuit of Muir. And closing the gap is Crosby. There's Aldana back in 5th slot. He was on a Kawasaki Superbike for the first 2 rounds of the series, found it not fast enough and not well enough developed, and got onto this Yamaha for the last 2 rounds here and at Sandown Park next weekend. Pretty comes off the banking.
And of course in front of him on number 7 is Steve Trinder, the fastest man in practices yesterday, and the man that beat Crosby in one of the heats at Oran Park. The other man that's beaten Crosby in the series so far is this man in the lead, Greg Pretty, who won one of the heats at Surfers last weekend, and with some very audacious riding. And Greg Pretty is the defending champion in the from the 1979 series, and we were talking to him earlier.
With me now, Greg Pretty from South Australia, the winner of the Swan series in 1979 with a grand total of 95 points. Greg, you're the only South Australian rider in contention for the series this year. You give yourself a chance with the final round coming up next week.
There's a rider down at the back of the circuit. We don't know at this stage who it is. An ambulance went with him at this stage. Greg Hansford, not a good circuit to fall on. A lot of concrete wall around.
Especially on that corner, John, they've got an Armco fence, as you can see, with those white painted tyres stacked up in front of it, but he'd be going very, very fast there where he came off.
The ambulance now coming to assist the rider. We'll try to find out who it is as the racing continues.
That's in the back section of circuit where they've come down to brake for the reverse camber onto the straight, and he slid wide there off into the grass and towards the wall.
There's Pretty.
And that was Graham Muir that fell on 96, the original race leader.
But bad luck for Graham Muir because he was riding so well in this event. And now Pretty is in the lead with Crosby in 2nd position.
No, it's not Graham Muir, that's wrong. Graham Muir's holding 2nd place, being hassled by Crosby at the moment. Aldana's 4th, a bit distant from Crosby, with Ron Bolden 5th on 59. Gary Coleman 52 is next. Dennis Neal then next on 4.
And Crosby now pulls out to pass Graham Muir, but Muir slams the gate shut on him as they go down the end of the straight, and Muir still holds 2nd position. Another bike off. And is that Pretty? That's Greg Pretty. He's down. Greg Pretty has crashed at the end of the main straight.
Come off the bike. Greg Pretty, the race leader. And Crosby now is the new race leader with Graham Muir behind him. So furious pace here. 2 of the riders down, including the race leader, Greg Pretty.
Greg Hansford, we noticed Pretty's bike jumping around under brakes before. Did he have a problem with the machine?
I don't know, John. It looked like he was trying awfully hard in those first couple of laps. The bike was leaving the ground when he was braking very heavily there, but he had trouble, I think, keeping the thing in a straight line going into the braking area when he started to make the turn for the corner.
Well, the bad news is that it's Steve Trinder who fell before, so that the people lying 2nd and 3rd in the series at this stage, Pretty and Trinder, both out of this race. The race leader and the series leader, Graham Crosby, on the Formula One Suzuki, running the smaller motor now, awaiting parts from Japan to rebuild the 1100 motor for the next weekend at Sandown.
There's Pretty down, the ambulanceman treating him now. Moving his legs up, seeing if his bones are in one piece. I would assume that they are.
Well, poor Greg Pretty has probably had a lot of the wind knocked out of him on that fall. And under good care there as we look in the speed bowl at the race leader, the style of the world champion on this class of motorbike, and the brilliant form behind him of Graham Muir, the Albury rider, as is Steve Trinder on number 96.
Graham Crosby holds 38 points in the series. And with these two major opponents down, second place in the series now is likely to be taken over by Gary Coleman, the Newcastle rider, who's fourth in the series up until now on 27 points.
Greg Hansford, what's the chances of Graham Muir staying with or even perhaps passing Crosby?
Probably not very much at this stage. I think the longer the race goes on, it'll be better for Graham, because I think he's a much smoother rider, easier on machinery and tyres, and the further the race progressed, I think the harder Graham would find it, Graham Muir that is, to stay with Graham Crosby.
Crosby now down on the banking again.
Unfortunately was thrown off his bike yesterday too, and has had a broken ankle pinned in hospital yesterday. Crosby down the straight and has completed 10 laps, is out on his second last lap now. Graham Crosby, the leader on C. Graham Muir there on the Taylor-owned bike. The Australian sidecar champion, Jeff Taylor, owns that TZ 750 that Graham Muir, the 26-year-old Albury rider, is riding.
Another 12-lap leg of the Swan Insurance Series on later this afternoon, and it will be a crucial point now as to whether Greg Pretty and Steve Trinder can repair both themselves and their bikes in time to get out for the second round this afternoon. Bike 96, Graham Muir, the Albury-Wodonga rider, in second position. Onto the banking, quite a way behind Graham Crosby now.
Pretty hectic race and a number of leaders. This was one of them, but he's going to finish second as Crosby now gets the blue flag to announce he's started his final lap. Up the main straight he goes. Have a look at a big 1000cc Suzuki building up to about 280 kilometres an hour as he starts to brake. The news on Greg Pretty was that he had equalled his lap record before he came down. He, one of the race leaders, as was Muir, and now Crosby leading as they go on to the final lap.
A lot of tension building before the start of this race. Greg Hansford, have you known such tension in Australian motorcycle racing before?
No, John, this series, the Swan Series as it is at the moment, has brought together the best riders and the best machinery from overseas. You're looking at there, Crosby's bike, one of the most exotic bikes here at the moment. The atmosphere is terrific, and it's the best racing I think Australian people have seen for many, many years.
Crosby now comes down to take the checkered flag. Started Glendix out. There goes the checkered flag. Graham Crosby takes the first leg of the third round of the Swan Insurance Series from Graham Muir in second position. Then Aldana in third position. Only just. Dave Aldana in third position.
In front of Ron Bolden, followed by Gary Coleman and Dennis Neal were the following finishers. So, a hectic first leg of this two-leg third round of the 4-round Swan Series for 1980. This is in its third year. In the first year it was won by Jeff Sale, who this year has really had a lot of bike trouble and has just finished now. And there's Greg Pretty sitting up in ambulance care there. And let's hope that he hasn't hurt his shoulder, which we were telling you had the message too. Good news is that Steve Trinder is okay. He was the one that came down first, and in fact may have come down more heavily because he had that concrete wall very close to where he finished up and may well have run into it. So good news that Steve Trinder is okay. We could see that Greg Pretty was obviously winded, but not too bad.
And good news as well is that Dave Aldana, the American rider, who has had such a dismal series to date with did-not finishes in both rounds with a bike that was not as well prepared as perhaps he would have liked, has moved on to a Yamaha TZ 750 and has come up to take third place in the first round in which he's ridden. Now, he didn't intend going hard in this first round. He just wanted to feel out the bike in the first round. He ran on Michelin tyres, old Michelin tyres, and intends going to new Dunlops for the second heat this afternoon, when he intends cracking the throttle wide opening and having a really big try. Greg, is Aldana up to the Crosbys of this world?
Yes, John, sure. He's raced in just about every country in the world where they hold motorcycle races, and he's won races in most of those countries. The problem he's got here is that he only got that bike on Friday, had his first run on Friday. The bike arrived late to the circuit on Saturday afternoon for qualifying times, and he didn't get a lot of practice in it over the last 2 days, so he wanted to just take it easy in the first race at racing speeds to see how the bike was and how he felt on it.
Aldana was particularly upset after the Surfers Paradise round last weekend. He won the start, a brilliant starter is that man, but dropped to 11th position by only lap 4 and then rolled the big bike into the pits and gave it away. His quote afterwards was that it's a thoroughbred race and they give me a donkey to ride. He's an outspoken man.
Well, he says what he feels, and he likes winning races. He doesn't like coming 11th, and I don't think he even liked riding around in 10th or 11th position.
There's the wreckage of Greg Pretty's Pittman's Yamaha TZ750, the bike which Andrew Johnson rode to victory in the Australian Championship this year. But that's Pretty's bike sitting there, and there comes Trinder's now, back on the back of one of the tow vehicles.
They could be lucky with Pretty's bike. He only slid through the grass, and it might not have done a lot of damage to it.
Trinder's bike certainly doesn't look the go.
I'd say
in fact, Andrew Johnson was also supposed to be riding, that, and did ride it in practice for the first round, but crashed it heavily.
And let's hear from Malcolm McDonald down in the pits talking to the race winner, Graham Crosby.
Well, Graham Crosby, congratulations. A fantastic race there in that first heat. Pretty hot out there, is it?
Yeah, it's too bloody hot for me, I can tell you.
Yeah, that's tremendous. And it was pretty crowded going to that first bend. Where were you situated right at that time?
Unfortunately, I think I was about in the middle, and it makes it a bit awkward. You know, I got stuck behind a couple of guys, and it was a bit awkward passing right at the start with new tyres and so forth, but everybody sorted themselves out and got going, and it was okay, you know, but it's just getting us sorted out so everybody can get going, you know.
Well, Graham Ewers had a blistering pace there at the beginning, didn't he? You didn't see much of him.
I didn't. He must have changed his leathers. I didn't realise who it was, and he was going away. I'm like, what the hell's going on here?
Yeah.
It's great.
Oh, fantastic. Bad luck about the fall, but I believe both riders are okay. Steve Trinder and Greg Pretty, I believe they're both okay.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah, that's great.
From where I saw it here, it was a real spurt of dust went up, and I feared the worst, but apparently they're okay.
Yeah, Greg's okay. I've just checked him up there. He's, I think he's got a sore shoulder or something, but he's going to be all right for sure.
Well, Graham, you're off to a great start here today with 10 extra points going on with your 38 points that you had before this first heat today.
I wonder if I can, you know, every time I go to these series, I always win the first race and come second, so therefore I don't win a round, but I'm going to try hard this time.
Yeah,
you know?
Right. Oh, that was fantastic. And what about the machine itself? It went well, obviously?
Yeah, it went good. You know, it gets a little bit slow towards the end. Generally, all the bikes do, you know, with the temperatures and all that. And, you know, I've got some minor modifications to make, mainly to the condition of me. I'm going to have a drink or something.
Right. Okay, then. All the very best, Graham, for the following events coming up later this afternoon. We're going to move aside here a bit, I think, because the ambulance is trying to get through. And we might be able to move off the track and get ourselves organised here to allow...
They're both okay anyway. Yeah. It's not, doesn't look as bad as it is.
So, no.
Luckily, we've got a lot of hay bales all the way around here, so it's really good.
Okay, well, thanks, Graham. And now we're ready for the next event on the program.